February 1979. The streets of Tehran were flooding with human bodies, millions of them, screaming, weeping, reaching toward a man stepping off a plane after 15 years in exile. The celebration was real. The hope was real. People genuinely believed that what was coming would be better than what they had endured. They were wrong. What followed the Iranian Revolution was not the justice those crowds had imagined. It was something far darker. A system of death so efficient, so coldly organized, that within months of the celebrations, the rooftops of Tehran were echoing with gunfire, and the killing had only just begun. To understand what Khomeini built, you have to understand what came before him. The Shah, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, had ruled Iran with absolute authority for decades. Cities modernized, oil money flowed, but beneath the surface, dissent was being crushed methodically by SAVAK, the Shah's feared intelligence service. Activists disappeared. Intellectuals were silenced. Political opposition was treated as a crime. By the mid-1970s, the resentment had been building for so long that almost any spark could ignite it. Khomeini, exiled since 1964, had been providing that spark for years. His voice traveled into Iran on cassette tapes, passed hand to hand in secret, played in mosques and private homes across the country. By 1978, those voices had become a movement. By January 1979, that movement had become a revolution. The Shah fled on January 16th. His departure was greeted like a national holiday. When Khomeini landed in Tehran on February 1st, the crowds waiting for him numbered in the millions. Within 10 days, the last institutions of the monarchy had dissolved. Military commanders refused to fight. Government buildings fell without resistance. The revolution had won. And then the question nobody had fully answered out loud became impossible to ignore. What happens now? The answer came fast, faster than anyone expected. Within 4 days of the revolution's completion, the first executions began. On February 15th, 1979, senior officials of the Shah's government were brought before a revolutionary court inside a building in Tehran. There were no defense lawyers. The trials lasted hours, not days. The verdicts, when they came, were always the same. The condemned men were led to the rooftop. Guards lined them against a wall. Rifles were raised. The shots echoed out over the city. Photographs of the bodies were published in newspapers the following morning. The message from the new government was deliberate and unmistakable. The revolution would show no mercy to those it called its enemies. The man who became the face of revolutionary justice was a cleric named Sadegh Khalkhali. His nickname among Iranians was the Hanging Judge. That name was earned. Khalkhali presided over trials that sometimes concluded in under 30 minutes. Defendants were accused of charges pulled directly from religious law, corruption on earth, waging war against God. These phrases, vague enough to apply to almost anyone the regime chose to target, became death sentences. Former generals, intelligence officers, politicians, one after another, they moved through Khalkhali's courts and out to execution grounds. There was no appeal. There was no second hearing. There was only the verdict and what came after it. And what came after it, increasingly, happened in public. The revolutionary government began using cranes for executions in city squares, construction cranes. The prisoner would be positioned beneath the arm of the machine, a rope secured around the neck, and then the crane would slowly rise. This was not a method designed for speed or mercy. Traditional hanging, when done correctly, breaks the neck instantly. The crane method did not break the neck. It strangled, slowly, in front of crowds who had gathered to watch. Sometimes the process lasted several minutes. The government called it justice. It wanted the country to see. It needed the country to understand who held the power of life and death. As the 1980s arrived, the executions accelerated rather than slowed. In September 1980, Iraq invaded Iran, and the war that followed became one of the bloodiest conflicts of the 20th century. Nearly 8 years, hundreds of thousands dead on both sides. And inside Iran, wartime became the justification for an even tighter grip on dissent. Anyone accused of espionage, sabotage, or collaboration with Iraq was processed through the revolutionary courts at terrifying speed. Evin prison in Tehran became the most feared address in the country. Prisoners arrived and often disappeared into its walls without their families being told anything at all. Then came 1988, the summer that Iran has never fully spoken about out loud. As the Iran-Iraq war ground toward its end, special panels were formed inside prisons across the country. They became known as death commissions. Political prisoners already serving sentences were brought before these panels one by one and asked a single essential question: do you renounce your affiliations? Those who said yes sometimes survived. Those who refused, or who hesitated, or who gave the wrong answer were taken out and executed. Thousands of them, in weeks. The bodies were buried in mass graves. Families received no notification. Some learned what had happened to their relatives years later. Some never learned at all. By the end of the 1980s, Iran had developed one of the highest execution rates in the world measured against its population. The revolution that had promised to replace oppression had constructed a machinery of death more systematic than the government it had destroyed. Supporters argued it was necessary, that the threats were real, the enemies were real, and the revolution had to be defended. Critics described it as one of the most sustained campaigns of state killing in modern history. Both of those things were said by people who lived through it. The crowds who filled Tehran in February 1979 were not wrong to want something different. They had endured real suffering under the Shah. They wanted real justice. What they could not have seen, standing in those streets with flags in their hands and hope in their chests, was what their revolution would become once the executions started and the cranes went up in the city squares. Revolutions promise everything at the beginning. It is only later, when the rooftops fall silent and the graves are dug, that the real cost becomes clear. And by then, there is no crowd left to protest it. There is only the silence of people who have learned, at tremendous cost, to keep their voices down.